Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Butte-Silver Bowl Council of Commissioners Committee, the whole meeting of January 27th, 2016. Could I have roll call, please?
There are 11 present, 1 presiding, and 0 absent.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask Commissioner Henderson to lead us in the pledge and the prayer.
Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which shall greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver Bowl. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Henderson. Report of the chair. First, I am just pleased as punch to introduce our new council secretary, Tracy Watt. If you haven't met her yet, I think she'd love to meet you and let her know a little bit about your district. All right, welcome. So welcome, Tracy. This is her third day and she's just jumped right in and doing a great job. So we really appreciate her being here. And thank you, Laura, for being our, I guess, boss of sorts, I guess.
Oh, no.
Well, not boss.
We're in trouble.
The mentor, right-hand woman. There you go. And another thing I want to mention too, and this is brought to my attention, that today is the world marks the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the United Nations, ever since 2005, the anniversary falls on the liberation of a horrible death camp in Auschwitz, Poland, and it's just. I know my dad was in World War II, and it was a long, long time ago, but there's still survivors and families of survivors. So I would just ask that we could just bow our heads in a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. Something to never forget about. Now, at this point in our meeting, we have the public comment on any item that is on tonight's agenda. Anybody would like to speak on anything that is on tonight's agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move right into section 1. Communication number 14-592, Dave Palmer, Butte-Silver Bowl Commissioner, District 12, requesting council's consideration to expand the no-shoot boundary within Butte-Silver Bowl. Commissioner Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just asked that we hold this in advance for 2 more weeks. I'm still waiting to hear back from the other person that had contacted me, so if we could just hold it in advance.
We'll do that. Thank you, Dave. Section 2, communication number 15-356, Kenneth and Michelle Palmer, 936 Arelda Street, Butte, Montana, requesting council's authorization to purchase county-owned property under the adjacent landowner policy. I talked to Karen Burns today, and we are still in the process of surveying, doing some consideration of swapping land, and there's quite a bit of activity going on over there in Arelda Street, and it's probably long overdue. So we will continue to hold this in advance and await some kind of response as a final note from the Land Sales Committee. Section 3, communication number 15-470, Dave Palmer, Butte-Silver Bowl Commissioner, District 12, requesting a crosswalk installed on Center Street, speed zone signs to be installed on Center Street, a tree on the corner of Buffalo and Main Street to be trimmed, and review of the alarm at the fire station. Commissioner Palmer?
Thank you. They're going to have a Centerville neighborhood meeting tomorrow evening, so after that we should be able to do something with this communication, but I'll ask that we hold it in advance until then.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Section 4, communication number 15-490, Karen Burns, Director, Butte-Silver Bowl Community Development Department, requesting council's recommendation to approve council communication 15-460, which is a request from Blaine Brown to purchase city-county property under the adjacent landowner policy. Once again, this is being held in advance. Survey is being done as we speak, and there's just some other details that are being ironed out in the land department. So we'll continue to hold that in advance. Section 3, Communication 15-537, Karen Burns, Director, Butte-Silver Bow Community Development Department, requesting council's authorization for a presentation on December 23rd, 2015 regarding the Butte Economic Gardening Project. I talked to Karen about this, and she has still is not prepared to make the presentation. She asked if we could just place this on file, and she will come back before this body with a new communication with a different date. So Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'll make a motion that we note communication number 15-537 and place on file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to note communication 15-537 and place it on file. Is there anything further on the question? Commissioner Purdue-Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, are we still paying for this project right now as we go into 2016?
I don't see Ms. Burns in the audience. I'm not sure how that question can be answered. No? Chief Executive.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Purdue-Dolan, I believe we are, but it's paid on a per hour basis. So if they're not providing any services, we're not paying for it. So, but the contract is still active, I believe.
Further question? Thank you. Thank you, Chief Executive, for that update. So we're going to, that's noted and placed on file. On the question, anything further? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Section 6, communication number 16-8, Pat Mundy, Maywa Society, Inc., requesting council's authorization for street closures to conduct the 2016 Chinese New Year Parade on February 13th, 2016, and receive a fee exemption. The only thing we were waiting for was the actual certificate of liability insurance, which we did receive. I believe that pretty much takes us right to the event occurring without any other authority. So Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'll make a motion that we concur with communication number 16-8 and place this communication on file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to concur with communication 16-8 and place it on file. Is there anything on the question? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Section 7, communication number 16-10, Patsy Coates, Property Specialist, BSB Land Records, requesting council approve the tax deed sale public auction to be held on February 17th, 2016, and ask the county attorney to prepare council resolution for approving the sale of certain parcels of the tax deeded real properties owned by Butte-Silver Bow. We did approve their request to have the auction, but now we are waiting for the county attorney's office to draft the resolution. So that'll happen on the same day that it occurs, February 17th. So we'll be expecting that on that date. We'll hold that in advance. Anything on that? Okay. Section 8, communication number 16-14, Ed Randall, Director, Community Enrichment Department, requesting council's authorization to give an update on the Butte-Silver Bow County Community Enrichment Department at the regular meeting agenda on February 3rd, 2016. We will hold this in advance till next Wednesday, and we will have that presentation. Section 9, communication number 16-21, David Schultz, Director, Butte-Silver Bow Public Works Department, requesting time on the February 3rd, 2016 regular meeting agenda for Council of Commissioners to take a final vote on the selection of the new location for the county shop site. Of course, we will hold that until next week, but I understand that if there's any questions or any kind of I believe Nick is here to answer those questions, or possibly is Dave here tonight? No?
David here.
Schultz? Anyway, Mr. Schultz asked if we could open it up for any discussion, but I don't see he's here. So, Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I asked the same question last week. We had the presentation and the preferable site, and then we had the two other sites were real close, and the third, fourth site was real close. The question I asked at that time, and I don't think we ever got a specific answer, was how is this vote procedure going to take place? Will it be like the poll site, yes or no? And then if that don't go, do we go to the second one, yes or no? Or are we going to have each commissioner pick their site? Do we have a process and procedure on how this vote will take place?
Commissioner Ralph?
I don't know what everybody else was thinking, but I thought like any other vote we take, somebody makes a motion, and if somebody disagrees, they make a substitute motion and go on down the line.
That would be my understanding, is that we put it out to a vote and there'd be a motion made and we would take that process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Palmer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. After last week I had stated that I think one of the best spots would be the Gilman site. But after thinking about it, and if the county is seriously looking at moving the crusher and the batch plant, then I don't think that's going to be the best site either. I think that we have to look at the MHD site out there, the MSE site. And I think that, there's a lot of land out there, even if you didn't have to buy all of the buildings. I think that it'd be worth looking at. And I don't know if any of the council has been out there and really looked at it, but, it might be worth taking a drive out there, and maybe, it's a secure site, but I'm sure we could contact somebody that would let us in and let us look at it so we can make an informed decision next week. I think it's something that should be looked at. It's my understanding that there was a study done by some of the universities, and that put that site up towards the top. And I think that, we've got to look at it. If we're going to think about moving the crusher and the batch plant in a couple of years, we've got to just look ahead and see which way would be the best. So just something to think about for the next week. But the pole plant, I just personally, I just don't think it's going to go there. And that's a recommended site for Butte-Silver Bow. So I think that something has to be looked at. So I'm just.
Commissioner Foley?
Thank you. I guess on that line, I was sort of notified by the individual that when it came to the MSE site, that in the proposal that we calculated the total cost for buying the entire property, but I was told that there was an opportunity to buy a smaller piece of parcel out there without all the intimates or buildings and so on. And I want to know if that was never really brought to our attention. I was wondering if that's correct or not. I'm not sure if anybody could answer that for us.
Nick, would you care to attempt to answer that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Foley. There was the possibility of actually purchasing the entire property of MSE, but what would happen would be, since it's such a large area and the Butte-Silver Bow shops wouldn't need that entire area, NRD would probably end up paying for just about half of it, so Butte-Silver Bow would have to end up funding the other half of that property.
Follow-up, Commissioner Foley?
I appreciate what you're saying, but I guess the comment was made to me that we didn't have to purchase the entire property, just what we needed, not the buildings, just the flat land that we could actually move the shops in fairly easily because all the infrastructure is there. So I'm not quite sure if that, if you understand my question.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Foley, sorry, I guess I didn't fully understand the question. I am not aware of any negotiations that occurred that just a piece of the property would be purchased. My understanding was the entire property would be purchased at one time, and not certain sections would be parceled out. Is what I've heard. So.
Any other commissioners, any comments? Chief Executive Vincent?
Commissioner Shaw, Commissioner Foley, just to give that, I mean, that would be a option, but it's unfortunately not in this case. In order for us to buy a portion of that property, it would have to be subdivided. There's some significant delinquent taxes on that property, and you cannot subdivide a piece of property until your taxes are brought current. So that's what defaulted to the purchase of the entire site, or what necessitated a purchase of the entire 53-acre site. So.
Okay. Commissioner Foley, follow up.
Yes, this will be a different question. And I guess I'll ask my friend, Mr. Canine, a question. Maybe you can answer it for me. Council has been getting inundated with emails this week from Dr. John Ray pertaining to the Montana Pole site. And he has steadfast talked about the concerns that he has for that site for years. And he continues to hit home with that. And as you read through his documents in terms of the technical aspect of it, he legitimately has concerns that the dioxins that will remain on the site. I guess from your expertise, Pat, I want to know what your opinion on that is. That something that we need to be concerned about? I realize that the state of Montana, DEQ, will certify that it's safe once they turn it over to us. But is there any lingering doubts in your mind that that is a quote safe site to build a county shop on, especially with a numerous number of employees that would have to actually be working at that site on a daily basis? And I hate putting you on the spot, but I appreciate and respect your opinion on this.
Pat?
Thank you, Dan. Pat Canine, 25 North Lake, environmental scientist for the Montana Department of Justice. Dan, that's a great question, and I can't speak to it specifically. As you stated, the Montana Department of Environmental Quality is the lead agency on that site, and actually NRDP does not have a role at all on that site. But what I know from reading their documents and looking at the cleanup there, that dioxin is actually a byproduct of the process of bioremediating the pentachlorophenol that was used to treat the poles there. Dioxin typically it becomes a carcinogen when it enters the food chain. You basically almost have to ingest it. And I think from what I've read, you're chasing parts per billion out there. And you're actually, when you're looking at how much is left in the soil, you're actually stressing the limits of the analytical equipment to actually find if it's there. I mean, it's that low. And is it safe for the county shop? If you ask me if I would work there, I would tell you yes. I would not have a problem going to work there. Basically, what the end product would be there is that they have some work to do to encapsulate some of the material, and then they would actually build a pavement cap on top of that and leave the footprint for the shop. And I think that the county, being aware of that, would be the best tenant there, because of all people, the county would have the responsibility of maintaining that cap. Whereas if it was sold to a private party, you always wonder if they would abide by the institutional controls that will be put on that property. And I know from time to time, certainly there'd have to be inspections on that, but I feel that it would be in good hands with the county. And whereas if it was with some other industrial user, you might not have that level of confidence in them. So Dan, I guess specifically, I can't speak to all the technical aspects. I have asked DEQ if they would come talk at a Butte Natural Resource Damage Restoration Council meeting. Mr. Tom Stoops, who is the lead for the Superfund group, is actually out of the office attending to a sick family member. And so I haven't gotten a response, but I would love to have the DEQ come over and talk to the public. And with that, we'd certainly invite everybody on the commission to come listen to that. But I don't know if we can get it teed up before your vote. But if you ask me if I would work at the shop, if it was on the pole plant, yes, I would.
Follow up?
Just
Commissioner
a quick
Fuller?
follow-up. I appreciate that, Pat, and I know it's difficult to have to, without being heavily involved in that on a day-to-day basis. I guess the ironic thing about this is that, you're the expert on the paratailings, and, the concern that we have to remove the paratailings because eventually it's going to contaminate Silver Creek, or it is. And the thought that any contaminants that remain on the Montana pole plant would have the same effect, possibly contaminate Silver Creek. And I know there's barriers, and I know there's monitoring that will take place and so on like that. But whether I agree with Dr. Ray, I'm not an expert, I'm not a scientist, but he throws enough doubt in there. I think that there isn't a single person that lives in this community that wouldn't, at least take a second look at that. And I think the concern here is that obviously we're in a rush because we want to get the paratailings removed and move that process this year. But I don't think there has been any long-term definite explanation to the public, and especially to the people in Butte, that there isn't any concern there. And I throw that out to you because I know that, you have a lot of expertise in it. And I guess there's no question. I guess the point is that there is some doubt that's thrown out there on that aspect, but I appreciate your honesty.
And I would, for the record, remind this body that, I went to our people in Helen and said, the first step in moving the paratailings is to move the county shops. And we absolutely want to do that with the least impact to the operation of that facility. And seeing that it was likely that we were going to do this job back in August of 2014, I sought the council, the Butte Natural Resource Damage Restoration Council's authority to appropriate the money to do this study. And I believe we got the contract to Butte-Silver in October, and it was signed in November of 2014. And that was, 8 months before the governor said, move the parrot. So this has been in the queue for 15 months now. So thank you.
Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess to follow up with Commissioner Foley's questions, and again, I don't need an answer on this, but it's something to consider, is I'm wondering if the DEQ is going to sign off on the land for us. If there becomes a potential problem in the future, are they going to indemnify the county on that behalf, or are we going to be stuck with it? I guess that's my biggest concern here, is just what we're going to be sold here. So,
Pat?
Commissioner Morgan, members of the council, that's a great question. And, it's my understanding, and I haven't seen the numbers, but apparently the balance left in the remedy account for the pole plant's roughly $30 million. To do the work at hand to get that site prepared to turn over for the county shops is probably not more than a few million. So there would be, roughly 25 or more million left. And certainly they could hold on to that if there was a contingency that something came up and they had to re-excavate what was capped, that money would be there. And I think it would be, very similar to the situation we're in now, where somebody else would foot the bill for the move. But I believe that would really be highly unlikely that would happen. So I think that the DEQ would really not be doing their due diligence if they were saying that this this area was clean enough for the shop. And I would say that if they're willing to say that and do the work to get it there, that it is good to go.
I guess so.
Follow up.
Just
Commissioner Morgan?
as a follow-up with that, I mean, for me, that's kind of a deal breaker, that if they're not willing to put something in writing before this body, I unfortunately will not be supporting it just because of that.
Yeah, I cannot speak
Sure.
for the DEQ, but I would say that is a covenant you want.
And Nick, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Morgan, I'd like to add to that. We would ask them to indemnify us in that negotiations, and it'd be written down on paper for us to accept that. Actually, yeah, we do agree with that. And then one thing, to go back to Commissioner Fisher's question on the vote for next week, what we propose is to authorize the chief executive to go into negotiations with both the Montana Pole and the Gilman site to kind of go from there, to go into negotiations with both of those pieces of property. So,
Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you. So that answered my next question of just making sure, next week is only a week away, and I was wondering if we were going to have a contract in front of us, but it sounds like we don't need to worry about that, because the vote next week is not going to solidify where the county shops are going. That's just opening up the negotiations between Chief Executive Vincent and your guys' team to make sure that's the true path that we're going before we execute any contracts or anything.
Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Morgan, that's exactly correct. Yeah, just a yes or no vote on whether or not the chief executive can authorize the negotiations in coordination with both properties at once. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Commissioner Foley?
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I think the communication, I think the goal here is for us to give approval for one site. And by telling the chief executive to get the best negotiations, that should be brought to us at that point next week. You've made your recommendation. Your number one recommendation is Montana Pole Plant. The second was Gilman's. This body should endorse one or the other. And if that falls through, then the chief executive should come back and make a recommendation or make a request for a second. I mean, I really think that that's only possible. I mean, obviously, I'm going to tell you straight out. I mean, that both of these are my district, and it puts me in a bind. And I don't want to play the catch-22 here. I mean, the bottom line is this: I want the council to join forces with me one way or another, or to give their voice on this. I mean, you've given us plenty of information, and I think it comes down, quote, to dollars, and that's what this council, if the council makes that decision, thrown into it. Mr. Palmer said, Commissioner Palmer, I mean, he makes some valid points there. Obviously, that is in the recommendations. And so I guess if this council wants to take a look at another one that's close, then I guess we have the power to make that recommendation as well. So it's in our hands now. So remember that. And I think we make the decision how we want to vote on this.
And I'll just comment that this is our decision. And if we decide not to take a final vote next week, we don't take a final vote. I mean, if we feel that we just haven't covered all the bases and we don't have enough information to make an informed decision, that's our choice to do that. Commissioner Sorich, excuse me, the other John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've got to be real careful on what we're voting on here, because this section 9 says to take final vote on the selection of the new location for county shop. I mean, the language says we are voting on. So I think we need to know, exactly. I think we got to be careful what we're voting on and where we're headed.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that reiterates what I started this conversation with. The thing about this, with 12 commissioners and 4 sites, if each commissioner brings up a site and gets a second, I mean, we got to have a process and a procedure for this voting, because we've been down this road before where we've tried to pull straws to see who's going where, show of hands, who wants this site. I think we need a little more distinctive process and procedure for picking this site. I mean, I just don't think that it's fair to the community or this commission to go with what Nick said, to give Matt the authority to start negotiating with Montana Polar or Gilman. That isn't the way this procedure is supposed to work, according to what I read. So I think we need a process and procedure of how we're going to vote, and not have it so Commissioner Fisher says, I nominate the Gilman site, and Henderson seconds it, and then we vote, and then that don't go so, then we go another way. I mean, that could end up in a real rodeo around here. So I think we need a process and a procedure, and I stated that from the beginning. Thank you.
Commissioner Pudue-Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question following up with Commissioner Palmer. I wanted to find out from folks that had spoken with me after last week and the presentation, could the MSC site be a viable county shop site along with what Nick had mentioned or just a little bit earlier, in needing 50 plus acres as well as on a parallel track with the new transitional economic development district? And if someone could answer that question, I was posed that question and I didn't know an answer to that. So I wanted to find out more about that. Thank you.
Mr. Sesso, did you care to speak on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the targeted economic development district, I wanted to go back to Mr. Palmer and this business of land use and the asphalt plant. And first of all, everybody's got to understand that the MSC site is zoned M1, so it is not currently zoned for an asphalt plant. Secondly, with respect to the Columbia University study, it was a study that targeted not the MSC site. It was the site to the south of the Basin Creek Power Plant, and it didn't have anything to do with the MSC site. And it was just a theoretical study of if we were going to move our asphalt plant, where would be some spots where it could go. It was not very accurate in the sense that it didn't include the zoning as a kind of a threshold criteria of picking where it might be appropriate. Thirdly, the Gilman site is not either suitable for the asphalt plant. It is zoned M1. The only sites that are zoned M2 that could have accommodated both sites, and based on, talking to everybody, we're not talking about the asphalt plant anymore. The asphalt plant is where it is, and if we have to move it, we'll deal with it when we have to move it. So we have been concentrating most recently just on the best home for the shops. And The three sites that were under consideration that could have accommodated both were the Montana Pole site, the Centennial Concrete property on Centennial Avenue, and the railroad property off of Continental Drive. You all kind of dismissed the railroad property for purposes of other economic development. So that one was taken off of the short list to do the intense evaluation that Andy and Pioneer Group did. So just be clear that the two sites that are 1, 2 in the rankings are both suitable for the county shops. And I just think it's very important that you understand that when we were going through this analysis, it was very important that we pick sites that were zoned properly for the use that is the shops. So let's keep that in mind. Now, with respect to the question of whether or not an asphalt plant or the county shops would be conducive, what Nick is trying to say is that we've researched the MSC site on the basis of 53 acres. We only have approximately 16 to 20 acres that are used for the county shops. The NRD is paying the freight here for us to move the county shops, and as a result, they're only willing to go so far as like kind. We have 20 acres for the county shops now. They'll pay for 20 acres or whatever we need to accommodate the county shops in the future. So if we pick the MSC site, it's 53 acres. Can't subdivide it because of other complications. And so if we picked it, we as Butte-Silver would have to come up with the money to pay the difference between what would be paid for under the NRD program and what would be out there as a site. We also testified last week as part of the presentation that it's not as clear cut as it once was perceived. It's not a matter of just moving into the MSC site. There is a big office building that accommodates 200-300 people. We only have 18 people in the county shops at the corral now. So that's not entirely conducive. The best building is occupied, and we have no intention of wanting to evict a going concern at the MSC facility as a tenant of that site. And there's one other building that has some promise, but will take substantial remodeling for us to be able to use it in the context of the county shops. The targeted economic development district, that's kind of designed to bring in manufacturing, bring in new business, bring in property tax paying customers. And so there is a little bit of a disconnect if we use a substantial portion of it for a public purpose and then not generate the kind of increment that we could use to develop the infrastructure that would be needed. And then lastly, I would say with respect to the process, it was our expectation to give you a recommendation. And the recommendation is that the county shops would probably be best suited for the Montana Pole site, but there are complications. And until we get the indemnification that was spoken of earlier, until we get the DEQ to stand in front of you and tell you that it's a safe site, and when they turn it over, there are not going to be any contaminant concerns today or tomorrow. And if in fact there are any contamination concerns tomorrow, that they're going to come through and pay for us to build and move the county shops again, well, it's unlikely that we would ultimately pick that site. So the second, the backup plan, plan B, if you will, is the Gilman site. And so we wanted to get your authority to essentially, enter into a negotiation to get a buy-sell or some type of negotiation instrument in place with Gilman. We'll let this run its course with Montana Pole. It's got to happen in the next, 30, 45 days. If we don't get all of our questions answered, we're not going to be able to use it just because of timing and logistics of the overall plan to get the shops out of the way for the pair tailings removal. And then we will be in a position to move forward with Gilman with some timeliness without having to bother you with the question again. So it'll be our recommendation to have a plan A And if Plan A doesn't work out for all of the reasons that everybody has concerns, then our recommendation will be the Gilman site. And then we anticipated a motion to either concur in the staff recommendation or then go about your business of saying whatever you wanted to do. So we weren't going to just leave you there hanging. We were going to come with a bona fide recommendation, and then you could deliberate on it and go from there, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Sorge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, has there been any kind of very preliminary discussions with the DEQ to saying that you're going to be coming forward with this, or are we going to start from scratch?
Madam Chair, absolutely. Commissioner, we have heard you loud and clear. I mean, let's face it, this is a strategic public policy decision that you guys got to make. And unless you guys get the assurance that you want, and we went from last meeting right to the phones on Thursday morning and said, hey, these guys are not going to pick this site unless they are assured that it's going to be safe, number one, it is protective of human health and the environment, and we get some indemnification so that we're not faced 20 years from now what we're faced with today. 50 years or 35, 40 years ago, we put the county shops on a mine site, thinking it would be there forever. Things change. Now we're moving it, and if we put it on this site, we got to be assured that if something ever came up in the future, we would have the resources to do it, because it's not fair to our community to have to be burdened with that choice. So we are again, Mr. Stoops, who would have been the individual who would make that presentation, he was making arrangements for the toxicologist, the lead toxicologist for the state of Montana, to come and address the very real questions associated with any contaminants of concern that would be left on the site. And it just didn't work out for tonight. But in the course of between now and the time we've got to actually pull the trigger on one or the other site, we want those people to come to you and give you the assurances, because, and the last thing I would mention is that even if we don't put the county shops there, the timing doesn't work, we can't get this all squared away. At some point, the facility, the 45, 50 acres, and we're also just talking about the acreage on the south side of the interstate. The 20 acres on the north side of the interstate, that is also part of the Montana Pole site, will always be. That's where the Penta treatment facility is. That's where the pump and treat system is located, where they're pumping contaminated Penta out of the ground. They're running it through that treatment plant, and they're discharging clean water to the creek every day as we speak, 400 gallons a minute. So that will always be part of that. But at the end of the day, at some point, the Montana Pole 60 acres are going to be declared as clean, delisted, and then we're going to have the opportunity to do something with it. And so we're going to need the assurances about its reliability, its protectiveness at some point when we go to Plan B on the Montana Pole site, on whatever it is we want to use that facility for in the long term. Because it's an asset for our community. We don't want to just leave it, fenced off and just grass is growing on it and never utilize that asset for the advancement of our community. So that'll have to happen anyway. And so we've been working on it, Commissioner Sorich. We want those questions answered. We would be remiss to make a recommendation to you without those questions answered, because otherwise, we can't live with our recommendation either.
Thank you, John.
Commissioner McDonough, and then Commissioner Prudhoe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we just heard just a few minutes ago that the hot mix plan is off the table at the moment, but I would hope that we would look in the future. I know that if we're taking the paratailings out for good reasons, and it's not if, it's when we're going to move the pole plan. So my request is that we include that in the plan, not officially, but if it's off the table, that it's considered that the acreage and the space, and whether it's zone variance or a zone change, is considered at some point to locate all of our facilities into one location. Because if we're cleaning two ends of the creek, we might as well get the middle, because 20 years ago when it was moved to where it's at now, it was pledged as a temporary location by the administration, and 20 years later, it's still in its current location. Outside of the discussion of moving county shops, when you move off of the interstate, I think it's just a poor location for people to come in and out of our community to drive through to smoke, or, you know, the byproduct of the treatment plant where it's at. And I don't think it's a good facility.
The asphalt plant.
Yes, excuse me.
Madam Chair, in that regard, there is a scenario where, first of all, much to the Commissioner's Foley's chagrin, the pole plant area is zoned properly for both. When we did our public information process back in the fall of 2014, we met with all the neighbors in the pole plant area, the Williamsburg people, the Boulevard people, and any other people that came to our workshops. We did a nice process there. To that extent, the people who live there were sort of lukewarm about the shops. Yeah, maybe, but please, no asphalt plant. They already got a couple, you know, on the other side of the street, on the south side of Greenwood, with respect to the two facilities that are there now. It's zoned properly, but there was a specific request to not put the asphalt plant there. It's zoned properly, but there was a specific request not to do that. But so for now, our endeavor to put the shops there is to put the shops there, put some green space on both ends, and make that a place, redo Greenwood Avenue, and make the whole place better because of the shops being there. It would not be our recommendation to put the asphalt plant there because it's completely contrary to the wishes of that neighborhood. On the other hand, the Gilman property, it's only zoned M1 also. It is not zoned for an asphalt plant. But as I mentioned, the 20 acres to the east of the Gilman property, the Centennial property is zoned properly for an asphalt plant. As a matter of fact, there's a crusher plant right on the property now. So if and to the extent we chose the Gilman property because of the right reasons, and you know, we had to move the asphalt plant someday in the future, it would be our endeavor to, you know, make some type of offer to the neighbor to the east where the area is zoned properly for the asphalt plant and co-locate at that location. It happens to be across the street from the Metro plant, and we're moving towards the idea of putting and consolidating all of our facilities in one place. And so there's benefits to both the Montana Pole site, with the exception of the neighbors who are pretty adamant about, you know, not having it there. But, you know, time passes, you know, maybe one of the asphalt plants on the south side of the street can, you know, is no longer there, and we could put it right across the street in an area where there already is one. So there's some opportunities for the consolidation that Commissioner McDonough is looking for in this decision at both the Plan A site at the Montana Pole as well as Plan B at the Gilman site.
Any further questions? Commissioner Pudu-Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick, I have a question. Following the latest update, there was a slide about cost analysis and plus or minus 25%. Are you still all working to sharpen those numbers down for the taxpayers, for those other costs that the taxpayers may incur, and that 25% number was high? And are you working to lessen those costs and that number so we can see a lower number, plus or minus? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Pudu-Dolan, yeah, that number will actually come down once we start narrowing down on a certain location. Those numbers were just based on, you know, all the locations. So there's no certain specific locations for those, or specific siding or specific buildings at each of those locations. So it was just a general number kind of thrown out there because we just had a general idea of kind of where the buildings would be located on each of the sites. Like I said, once a site is picked and locations are hashed out, that number would greatly decrease. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner.
Thank you. One last comment. I appreciate Mr. Cecil's comments about, the listening to the residents there. Obviously, I think we saw an example of that last night when there was a meeting discussing in East Butte to rezone that from where it's at right now. So obviously, you're taking the message there, and I hope that's the case as well there. So, but the one thing we have to understand is that you're correct. We looked at the zoning, but things can be rezoned. Mr. Cecil confirmed that. And I guess maybe put a little humor into this, I guess that since Commissioner McDonough is dead set that the appearance of the hot plant when you come off the interstate, I guess I'll have to bring over and show you, go on the other side of the interstate is where the Montana pole plant is. And so are the other sites that we're looking at. The interstate comes in different directions there. So it's all on the view side of coming off the interstate, regardless of if we put any of those sites. But I guess what I would say to Commissioner McDonough, that possibly since you're removing the county shops out of your district and moving them into mine, maybe after we clean up the para-tailings, we can rezone that area and put the hot plant and pressure over there. I'm sure it'd be well accepted by your neighbors. So thank you.
I thought you were going to suggest Clark Park. Commissioner McDonough, rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think it makes good sense to put them all in one place. I appreciate the humor, but I've never had a comment in the 3.5 years that we've had the shops. And I know that causes a lot of heartburn with a lot of people, but the shops are a really good neighbor in District 8. We actually maintain our property, Butte-Silver, and we do a really nice job of not only maintaining the facility, but like policing the area too. It looks really nice over there, despite what it's built on that we all discuss here. But I understand your concern, Commissioner Foley, but south side of the interstate is not off of an interstate exit or entrance into the community. So I think every hot button issue that we've discussed has been in District 8, whether it's been the shops or the Brinks and the Deluxe, and I could go on, but I think everything that we've talked
Okay. Thank you all for this discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for giving us some more information, and we'll just see you next week. I guess that's the plan, and we'll go from there. Mr. Cecil?
Madam Chair and members of the council, would you prefer or want us to put in writing our specific recommendation for next week, by like Friday, and so you had it, and you rather than leaving it up to a oral presentation on the night of February 3rd, perhaps we could prepare a sort of a memo that states our recommendation and the various conditions that we would want you to contemplate before making your recommendation. We were a little bit brief in our letter, just saying, hey, we're going to make this presentation on the 3rd, but perhaps it would be helpful along the lines that Commissioner Fisher was requesting, to have some type of structure to the decision-making process. We would be willing to do that for as soon as Friday if you'd like. That's your choice.
Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, John, for offering that. Absolutely. I mean, to me, I need something in writing of what your conditions would have to be for the pole plant for me to even look at it. If I don't have each one of the conditions spelled out in a memo type form, I'm not going to support it. Just because I can make a motion that says this and does this, but unless it's in writing, I'm not buying into it. So I don't think you have to do an actual communication, but even if a memo came to us during the meeting, so we had that to refer to, I would be fine with that. But
Any other comments from council members? Would that meet your satisfaction?
Because we can segregate this communication out of the committee of the whole.
Yeah.
Next week.
Sure. What I was essentially thinking that is that we would make, we would write an email You know, we just send it to you all so you have it, you know, basically put in writing what we were saying tonight so you can contemplate it as a motion, and it might expedite your process next Wednesday if you have something to at least start with, and then you could have a variation from there rather than, you know, just have to think of it yourself and deal with it. But I just think it's our obligation to be more specific with you on why we make the rest of it. You know, we had the study that was completed, but that gets us to the point of really having to make a tough choice. And I think we, as staff, we want to give you the benefit of all the thinking we've put into it in preparing our recommendation to you. And I think we would do that. We would put it under the chief's signature and send it to you, you know, by Friday or Monday morning at the latest.
It's the pleasure of the council. Do that? Okay, thanks, John. And so whatever you do give us, that will give us the meat, you know, the meat of what we're going to be voting on. Okay.
Or not.
Okay. And the sooner the better. That'd be great. Thanks. Thanks, John. Okay. Well, let's continue to hold this in advance, and it would require being taken out of the committee of the whole report next week to take care of it. Okay. Thank you. Section 10, Communication 16-27. Craig T. Williams of 803 North Main, Butte, Montana, requesting council's authorization to purchase county-owned property under the adjacent landowner policy. And this has been sent to our land sales committee, and we are awaiting their recommendation back to this body. So we'll continue to hold that in abeyance. Section 11, Communication 16-32, Cindy Shaw, Butte-Silver Bow Commissioner, District 11, requesting council start the process of selecting an interim treasurer for the city county of Butte-Silver Bow. I took the liberty to talk with Eileen, and we vetted a timeline that we felt was appropriate, that would meet, well, there really isn't a lot in the charter that spells out how this is done, but Mr. Callahan, his last day is the 29th of February, so going back from there, we want to make sure somebody's in place on the 1st of March, and that position would be held through the election on November 7th. So what I've drafted here is a draft timeline, which we can certainly change. Although we will advertise the job posting starting on Sunday. It'll be in the Butte-Silver Bow website, and also the first ad will be in the Montana Standard. It'll run for 8 days, including 2 Sundays. So this coming Sunday, the 31st, and the following Sunday, it'll run the 7th, I believe that is. And then twice in the Butte Weekly. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to see the job posting. As you know, with an elected official, there are no real requirements other than being an adult, a voting registered voter, and you have to live in Butte for at least a year. Those are the only 2 requirements. I know that once the treasurer is in place, they have to be certified on an annual basis. There's certain continuing education things that have to be done. But basically, that will be the application, and we will accept applications until the 12th of February. That gives about 12 days for us to collect resumes, and people that are interested, those will go to the clerk and recorder's office, and they will collect those for us. The 12th is on a Friday, and so the following Monday, all those applications will be submitted to the council. Each of us will get a copy of each of the applications, so we have about a week to look at them on our own. And then we will ask a special meeting from the chief executive to please call a special meeting on the 23rd to do the interviews. We've done this before. Several of us have been down this road once or twice before. And then at that time, on that night, we will appoint an interim treasurer. So that's just the basic way it goes. I believe it's a prorated, somebody might ask, and it won't be in the application, but the treasurer makes a certain amount of money as an elected official, and that amount would be prorated. They would get a check once a month like we do at a prorated rate. And I vetted that with Danette, so I believe that's the way that would run. So otherwise, other than that, we'll come up with some questions like we have in the past. When the interviewing time comes along, we'll, as a council, we can continue to keep this communication on the committee of the whole agenda, and we can come up with some questions to ask the applicants, and that's pretty much it. So I don't know if there's any questions or concerns, or otherwise we'll just see the ad will come out on Sunday, and our clerk and recorder's office will collect the applications. So keep you posted. Does that sound good? Any questions? Oh. Okay. And Matt, I'll make sure you get one of these. I'll just send it to you online. Okay, so we'll hold that in advance. And section 12 is communication number 16-33. Jim Fisher, Butte-Silver Bow Commissioner, District 6, requesting council look at the fairness or the unfairness of council members being on staggered terms for elections. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have reviewed this a little bit, and I visited with some people that have a little bit of legal background. And there was some cases back in the 1940s, actually, in Butte-Silver Bow, and there's been other cases throughout the United States. And my proposal was that if a commissioner ran, they should resign their seat the following January. Well, that is as unfair and as fairness as the process we have now. And the decision that's come up, and it don't sound like a very good idea, but the best advice I got was when Eileen told me she probably didn't know, and that's what most of them told me is they didn't know. But in a Butte-Silver Bow, it is probably legal to file and run for 2 offices. It's not legal to hold 2 offices, but the determination on this would be held to go to the clerk and recorder and file for 2 offices if you so desired. And at that time, the clerk and recorder would have to refer to a district judge. But other than that, we stand the way we stand on this. So at this time, I would recommend and make a motion that we place communication, note, and place on file 16-33.
Second. We have a motion and a second to note communication 16-33 and place it on file. Is there anything on the question? Thank you for that update, Jim. Commissioner Foley.
Yes, I was just curious if you're going to test that theory.
Commissioner
Thank
Fisher.
you, Madam Chair. We have a long time before that date to decide.
County Attorney.
Oh, excuse me, County Attorney Joyce.
Well, just for clarification, the state law does prohibit a candidate for filing for more than one public office.
All right, Jim, you stand corrected. Thank you, County Attorney Joyce. Anything further on the question? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, is there anything else to come before us this evening? No, we do have public comment on any public matter not on the agenda. Mr. Van Rob?
Harvard Van Rob, 2601 Grand Avenue. Subject of my comment is procedure. Procedure used by this council to approve a request to include the aquatics measure on the June 7th, 2016 ballot, 15 ballot. As I said before, I am all for projects that provide jobs and improve our community. But I am adamantly opposed to the procedure used to approve this bond issue measure. Again, I want to say I believe, for all the same reasons that the Butte Local Development Corporation Director stated at your last meeting, that we all agree that a summertime aquatics facility at Stodden Park that would provide climatically appropriate, family-friendly recreational activities would be good for our community. But I have also seen families enjoying the glorified splash pads and water slides at the enclosed facilities at the Billings Reef, the Mandan Mall, and the Des Moines Ramada Tropic Resort. To say I most probably the 88% of those 397 people that I have talked to on the street, and many others in our community, are extremely disappointed in the action taken by this council last week would be a gross understatement. I have nothing against anyone on this council. I have nothing against anyone in the Butte-Silver Bowl government. But I am adamantly opposed to the current dictatorial system and procedures of this local government. A dictatorial system is a kind of system that a large percentage of the people I have talked to perceive this local government to be. If you are not aware of this perception, I would suggest that maybe you haven't been talking to the people on the street. Yes, the current system works for some. The only problem, it is not the system stipulated in our city-county charter. Again, I question the legality of the procedure you used to determine the bonding for the Stoughton Park pool. This was a major strategic public policy decision. The Butte-Silver Bowl City County Charter stipulates that this Council of Commissioners shall determine policy. But furthermore, that same charter stipulates and mandates that this Council of Commissioners shall authorize community councils to advise this Council of Commissioners. Therefore, any consideration and/or decision made by this Council of Commissioners relative to pool policy is most probably not legal until the community council provision of the city-county charter is fulfilled. When what seemed to be a politically motivated proposal prepared by a greed-motivated expert that does not have to go through bidding process to obtain city-county contracts is presented for the same old design that is climatically inappropriate, that has already been rejected by the voters once. We, the people, expect you, our elected representatives, to vet that proposal through the proper community councils, fact-finding, listening sessions, and advisory procedure prior to making any policy determinations. And FYI, these same comments apply to Section 9, Communication 1621, that are on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Any further comment on any items that are on, not on tonight's agenda? Anything else to come before us this evening? Any announcements or anything? All right, Commissioner Morgan.
Make a motion, we adjourn. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?